Today, we're talking about building passionate communities that drive product growth. How can you create an authentic, engaged community that transforms your product's trajectory? We're talking about turning fans into collaborators, advocates, and even co-creators. As a product manager, you need to know how to build something customers don't just use, but actually love. This discussion is going to explore the steps to tap into the power of community, learning from successful examples at Lego and Apple, and maybe some others that come up. Our guy to make all this happen is Jake McKee. He's the original Lego community guy, and he didn't just grow a community, he helped change the culture of one of the world's most iconic brands, reviving a rapidly declining company at the time. Today, he advises organizations on how to build loyal communities that fuel innovation and drive business results. This discussion will help you avoid disaster and instead deliver sustained growth. If you're listening and want to watch our discussion instead, you can do that on our YouTube channel. Simply go to YouTube and search for Product Mastery Now. Let's jump in right after this.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Jake, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I love Lego's background. I have investigated it some, right? They have had their ups and their downs. And you joined at a really interesting time. And I'm actually kind of surprised we haven't talked before. I'm so glad we can talk now. There was a time when Lego, they were bringing in the innovation consultants and paying people to say what they should do next. And they were good at working with plastic, with ABS. And they went in a lot of different directions. And they were actually declining severely at one point in time. And this is, I think, when you were involved, because the community was starting to become a thing that was getting known. And they were clearly making their turnaround as they developed loyal fans with that community. Can you give us a sense of your involvement and what that community building was like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics as a kid who grew up wanting to work for Lego. As some kids wanted to be a fireman or a policeman or an astronaut. I wanted to work for Lego, right? Yeah, so I joined at a time where the company was really starting to feel the pain of a number of years of investment in simplified, kind of broad focus innovation designs, right? So there was an idea that when they did the research and they discovered that kids had, when you and I were growing up, something like 4 hours of free time per day to just go play, right? And it had grown, it had shrunk to around 15 minutes a day. And so the mindset was, well, let's make sure that we're still relevant, which always a troublesome term when you really get down to it, this idea of relevancy instead of quality or delight. But in a desire to be relevant, the company had really focused on simplifying the play experience, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we take what used to be 3 or 4 or 10 parts and turn them into one big part and make that build experience as rapid as possible? Well, the best part about Lego is the build and rebuild ability of the core element, right? Right. And so when we lost that flexibility, I can build a helicopter with 3 parts and then I'm done. It was sort of the world's worst toy, right? Because it wasn't a very good helicopter toy and it wasn't a very good Lego toy. And the business had started to see some decline in that. But at the same time, when I started, we hadn't really seen a huge impact of that just yet. It was starting to have signs of struggle. There was some concerns. It took a couple of years after I started to really hit that point where I can talk about in a second. But as part of a group called Lego Direct that was run by an incredibly smart guy named Brad Justice, who was brought in specifically to sort of centralize all this direct-to-consumer efforts that the company had in bits and pieces around the company, the catalog sales and the very small online presence that we had at the time. Just to give you an example, when I joined, the Lego website was still using the blue and purple default link colors on their very stark gray background, black text website. And so Lego Direct really rebuilt the website. They improved the catalog business. We started to do exclusive kits specifically for the adult fans, which at that time was a group that had been completely and totally ignored by the company for decades. And when I came in as a senior web producer doing a variety of web development projects and leading those, But I also was doing sort of a second full-time job of working with the adult consumers, people 18 plus who were building with Lego as a creative medium. And I was the point of contact between the company inside and the adult fans outside, and tried to bring their voice back into the company as much as possible. And I can go into that process of how did I establish that practice in the company, but let's just say it was hard work. And I did that for several years, ground away at it. We did some really good stuff. We started to get some level of traction. And then Lego nearly hit bankruptcy. And I don't know these days if people really understand how close to bankruptcy we came, but it was very close. And
Yeah. I think this was like, what, 2003 or so?
2003, yeah, exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And when that near bankruptcy happened and budgets, of course, got slashed like crazy, a lot of my colleagues who had been sort of saying, oh, these adult fans, who cares? They started saying a very different tune of, wait a minute, what was that free marketing thing you were talking about? Yeah, my budgets are slashed. Maybe I can pay attention now. And it opened the gates in some pretty significant ways, ending in a project that we actually brought in originally 4, but we added 5 more adult fans, representative voices from the community, to help us design the Lego Mindstorms 2.0 project.
Right.
That ended up hitting the cover of Wired magazine about a week or 2 weeks after we launched that year. So a very interesting timeline.
EV3 robotics, was that it?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's the newer version, but it was the NXT.
The next, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
NXT.
yeah. Yeah, and that was a very interesting project too, which we could talk more about later. But yeah, it was a very interesting time to be in the company. And I look back, I just talked to a colleague recently within the last couple months, and he was saying that the business now is about 45% adult fan focused. When I was there, I was struggling to get people to pay attention to 1%, right? So it's a very big change, as you might imagine.
Yeah, and brought about by the community. I think
Absolutely,
that's a great lead in just to capture attention, right? Because as you said, no kidding, Lego was this iconic brand that many of us grew up with and was just headed for bankruptcy and really struggling. And yeah, we don't need to go into the details of that, but it was this resurgence of getting closer to the customers, building the community and getting direct feedback from what the community wanted. And it turned out there were a lot of adults that enjoyed Lego building and really was the thing that led the way for quite some time and still does. And huge resurgence during COVID, right? I know several people that talked about building their Lego kits in the evenings and something to do. So that was great.
Absolutely. And this idea of community is a really interesting one, because a lot of times when I have these sorts of conversations about this timeline we just talked about, there's a certain default mindset that, oh, community equals the adult fans. And my position, sort of my goal really all along, was to convince the world and the company that Lego is a creative medium. Because if I can convince you it's a creative medium, I can sell just about anything to anybody, right? I could sell to grandparents who want to buy a really amazing creative medium, not just a disposable toy, to their grandkids. I can get educators to say, yeah, I absolutely want to bring it into the classroom. I can get adult fans to take it to work and say, yeah, of course I'm bringing a Lego model to work. I'm not weird or strange. I'm an artist. And let people see that and get excited about that and want to do it themselves. I talk a lot about the community and the adult fans, but one of the things that's really interesting and important to keep in mind for people who are thinking, oh, we've got some passionate customers in our user base, is that they are a market in and of themselves, absolutely. And there's things that you would want to do to pay attention to them specifically.
Right.
But it's also about really understanding what's the impact of their voice, right? There's the reason that my 18-year-old daughter is building like crazy with the Lego flowers is in part connected to this idea of a creative medium at play, right? And how the company thinks about product, not audience or persona, right? That the flowers I love making them. There's a really great bonsai tree I literally saw in Target yesterday and was like, oh my God, I want this thing so bad. That's part of the flower assortment, right? And I don't build every day anymore, but I still love to build. And that's a perfect sort of interesting project for me. And it's really thinking about, for me, it's been the ecosystem of activity, right? How does my passion for it, maybe as an adult fan, that is part of a club locally who brings a 50-foot square train layout to a shopping mall on a holiday weekend. That's my passion. But now I'm bringing in people who just walk by, parents that go, oh my God, this is amazing. If I bought Lego, even though it's a little pricier than some of the disposable cheap toys, then my kid could be doing this kind of stuff. That's amazing.
Right.
All right, I want to do that, right? And so the idea is much more about the ecosystem approach, right? That this is a lot of different audiences working together to do something really amazing with a common or fairly common footprint of product, right?
Yep.
That those Lego kits, large Star Wars kit might be amazing for adults and children alike. It's just that the adults can afford it more easily. Right.
Right.
But it's not inherently an adult product. And I use my quotey fingers when I say that. It's a Lego product that is amazing and large versus a Lego product that's amazing and small. Right.
Right.
And that sort of mindset shift, I think, is the part that I'm really the most proud of the work that I did so many years ago.
Yeah. There's a number of people that grew up with Lego, and it's a significant segment today that wants to still build. And we're going to get into how do we actually build the community to help our product growth. But before we get to that, you have helped a number of organizations do this work, right? To build communities for this purpose, to really see improvement in products, co-create with customers, build those loyal fans. You also did it for Apple. I was just kind of curious what that was about.
Yeah, and Apple was a very different project, but yes, that's my day job is helping companies of all sizes understand how to more directly connect with their customers, and that may be large-scale support platforms to help create peer-to-peer dynamics for support issues for more technical products, or it may be small programs of customer engagement to just help bring the customer community fan base closer to the company itself. Or what I've been doing a lot more of lately is what I call community-driven product development that is really focused on how do we bring the representative voices, small numbers of representative customer/community voices into the product development black box, right? So typically we have kind of a collection at one side where we're getting all of our stuff, our knowledge, our research, our data, our directives. And at the other end, we've got verification where we say, hey, we've built something. Is it functional, right? Is it good?
Right.
But in between, we often remove that customer voice. And as a community guy, I like to have that be a consistent thread throughout. So I help all kinds of product teams for physical, digital products, big, small teams, put those formal programs in place to bring some of those voices metaphorically or sometimes literally to the table and give them a seat for their input, right? But to your question, Apple was an interesting gig because I was in charge of the Apple global support community that had it was a multiple language peer-to-peer support community that had tens of thousands of net new questions asked per month. And my role was running that platform and that team to really make sure that we were helping to drive the success of those peer-to-peer needs and requests. And we had a group of about 200 volunteers that answered a pretty significant percentage of those questions each month. And we had a small team internally that also helped answer and flag it as quasi-correct answers in the community. And it was really interesting team design to make sure that we had just random users, we had these super users, then we had our own team, we had our moderators, all kind of working to make sure that if somebody asked a question, they could get an answer quickly.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks for sharing that, the work there with Apple. The opportunity to use existing customers as kind of in our product development lifecycle to help us make sure we're staying close to the customers and turning them into even more fans participating with us is really important. And it's a key way that companies have seen growth in the company and growing products. And would love for you to take us through like the practical steps. So anyone that's listening that maybe has a community that they're not really seeing fruit from it yet, or like, oh, this makes sense. I've heard of some communities around. Maybe I should be looking at this for product growth for what we're doing. What are the practical steps to get going? What should we be thinking about?
Yeah, so let me start off with sort of two types of level setting. So the first one is the level setting around partnering with our community, our passionate customer voices for the development of the product or service, right? That's sort of one block. The other block is how do we make sure that there is a space, a mindset, programs, activities in place once we have that product out in the marketplace to keep the interest in it high, the usage of it high, the retention or renewal rates high, all that sort of thing that really creates and maintains passion largely, right? One is much smaller. We don't bring tens of thousands of people to work side by side with the product team. Those are like 4 or 5 people, maybe 10 people, depending on the size of project, maybe 40 or 50, but that's about it, right? That's where it starts to tap out. The other programs can be a few hundred users, depending on the type of community we have. If you've got chemical engineers and it's a very specific niche space, 100 people can be a radically important and very passionate community base for that particular product or service. All the way up to tens of thousands of people in large communities of various types. So we'll kind of separate those two a little bit.
Okay.
The other part, so if we think about just the product piece, we're not necessarily focused on growth there, but we are focused on multiple outcomes. In anything I talk about with community, I call it the Octopus Theory. There's always 8 tentacles to what you're doing, right? So it's never just you do a thing, you get a result. The goal is that you do a thing and it gets you 8 results, right? So in the case of this community-driven product development, the CDPD approach that I've been using for many years, the idea is to build the right program at the right time. So there's 4 big components of that. One is finding the right people. So the right voices that really feel good to the community when you launch this thing and you say, hey, we developed this product, but we did it with representation from your community. Here's who those folks are. You want the rest of the community to say, oh man, I'm really jealous of them, but I get it. Yeah, That's a good choice. I believe that what they said represents me, right? That's
so the right people to be in the community.
Right. Yeah, or the community or program. The second piece is the right timing. So you may have 2 or 3 people that you ask at a very early ideation stage. You may have 40 people as you get sort of to the 75, 80% complete mark, and you want to really get them involved in that sort of that last push of product design. You may have a program of 10 or 20 in the middle of that process, right? You may have those 5 people may stick around from the beginning to all the way through to the end. It really just depends on what kind of project you have, what level of secrecy, what level of complexity, a bunch of different things. But really the right timing is the second piece. The third piece is the right outcomes. So why are we bringing these people in? Are we trying to get better ideas? Are we trying to just make sure that we're not missing anything? Because when we launched version 1, boy, we didn't ask anybody and we launched it and they were all mad as hell. So this 2.0 version, we want to make sure that we're not missing anything that's really tapped in. Or is there something that is very specific? We want a certain type of testing, or we want a certain type of voices or feedback in a certain part of that cycle, right? And then the fourth piece is the right activities, because I can get the right people together at the right time. We're all focused, both company and community members, focused on the right outcomes. But if I don't give all of us something to do, and those activities aren't enjoyable to everybody involved, it's not going to work very well, right? And this is really finding ways where I talk about building a program, because it really is a formal program design that we're trying to make sure that going into this, that we're not just whack-a-moling when the product team needs something, or when they decide to sort of pop their heads up and say, oh yeah, I'll ask a question today, and then it's 6 weeks later and they've not asked anything, right? We really want to make sure that this is different than a traditional survey or research study, right? Where we do just kind of hit them randomly and say, we've got a new survey for you, fill it out, spend 10 minutes and you're done. We want an ongoing, this is relational, right? Everything I do as a community nerd is relational. And I want to create a honest to God relationship between those members of the program, the community members of the program, and the product engineers, the product managers, whoever on the product team is doing that work. So that they really so that's issue 1, right? They're getting great feedback. You hopefully make the product better. Maybe that's tentacle 1 of our Octopus Theory. Tentacle 2 is that because we're doing it over time, not just as a one-off, we're sitting across the table asking a group of customers, what do you think? What do you want? And they give us some answers, and then we say, okay, great, we're going to go make some extrapolations and run with it, right? We're actually creating a relational engagement over time where both parties start to be more comfortable asking harder questions, giving harder feedback, seeing how things unwrap and unravel over time, right? That's a very important component of this. There's Tentacle 2. Tentacle 3 is that we're starting to watch in real time how users respond and what really resonates with them. Product marketers love these sorts of programs because they don't have to wait till nearly the end of the product development to start making product plans and developing product marketing programs. They can watch what people respond to and what gets them really excited. What's the first thing that they ask for in this sort of impassioned environment, right? And the last two big tentacles here that I always think about is, one is thinking about what happens when you launch. Wouldn't it be amazing to be able to launch your product on day 1, already having advocacy, right? Already having built-in people that are members of the community that you can immediately insert back in and say, go for it. You can speak about the program. You can speak about your experience in some broad or limited ways. but they're out there speaking on your behalf on the moment that you launched that product, not 10 or 100 days later when the entire community started to buy it, started to get up to speed. No, on day one, you've got people really advocating for you, and they helped create it,
Yeah.
so they love it as much as you do. And the last piece, that all those are fairly straightforward. Okay, that makes sense. The one piece that so often gets missed, though, is engineers and developers can get bored. Right. When you work on something for a year or 6 years or even 6 months, right? It's just the daily grind. You come in, it's as excited as about the product as you may be. It's still hard to stay at that top level of enthusiasm, right? There's something amazing about having a group of people who are truly impassioned to be present in that process, that are not part of your direct team, that are cheering you on, that are having, again, building a relational support system that can be truly amazing. And the example I always give is I'm a scale modeler for fun, right? I build very complex, tiny things. And when I bring these little small things into my family or my wife, and I say, hey, look what I did. I just spent the last 4 hours doing this thing that's a half inch by a half inch big. And they're like, that's great. We're very proud. They don't have any idea what I'm talking about. They just know that I'm excited, so they're excited for me. That's very different experience than when I talk to my scale model friends and they say, oh my God, that's stunning. I've never seen something so good. How did you do this? I can't believe you were able to make this work. I tried this through 2 years ago and it didn't work at all. I gave up. I can't believe you pulled it off. There is something rejuvenating and inspiring and invigorating about that does not come unless it's sort of, unless it's connected, unless it's really next to the knowledge base, so to speak, of what I'm doing. And when you put all this stuff together, it can really change the way a product is developed, how it launches, how it grows over time, and of course, how much fun it is to actually make it in the first place.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Not one that I would have thought of before we talked, right?
Right.
The motivation that comes from having external people involved in the development cycle and contributing to that. There's lots of stories of, my background is engineering, so as an engineer, there's lots of stories of us engineers ignoring customer feedback when it comes through someone in the company. Right? It's like, that's not really on our list of what we want to build. It doesn't sound interesting. We're not going to do it. Until the customer themselves shows up and says, no, this is really important to me, and this is why I need it. And if you don't build it, I have to look elsewhere. Right? And they go, oh, okay, now I get it. It's different when you have the customer directly interacting, and that comes about.
It is. And I think there's something really, really important in that reality. And it's that it's tough to take feedback from colleagues because it's always so easy to dismiss, right? If somebody who knows you really well that calls you out on something, I mean, yeah, but we can debate it all day long. When somebody else you've never met shows up and says, by the way, this thing your family's been telling you for years, I saw on the first 30 seconds of meeting you, it's really hard to ignore, right? And there's something really powerful about stories. For humans love stories. They love connection. And when you put somebody from outside the company in front of a product engineer or even an executive or anybody else you're trying to help convey a message to, hearing it from a unique perspective told as a story, and which is the experience that customer may be bringing, it's really powerful, right? It really resonates in our core soul as human species, people, right? There's something about it that just gets straight to what we can pay attention to. And which is why I often, as a community guy, when I'm trying to get points across about, what the community believes or thinks, I have my data. I always have my reports and dashboards and studies and surveys and all that. I've got all that in my back pocket, but I always try and find a way for somebody else to tell it and tell it in a humanistic way, because any amount of data can be easily dismissed. Well, yeah, but you asked the wrong questions. Yeah, but that was 6 months ago. Yeah, but it's really hard, like you say, when somebody's standing in front of you as a person saying, I have an experience and I'm going to tell you what that experience is. And it's always so funny to me how fast people can get completely on board, to the point that sometimes we have to slow them down and say, okay, now that was one perspective. We need to balance it with all the others and see what the value of that perspective is. But it is very significant, important, relevant perspectives to have, for sure.
Yeah. I just love the momentum that can be built with that community to have more people supporting the product on your behalf and contributing ideas for it. And so your four-part framework here that I like, the four steps, the right people in the community. So we have to source the people to start with, the right timing, recognizing what is it, where are we in the product development life cycle? What is it that we need to accomplish, right, with them? The right outcomes, which ties into that life cycle approach, and what is it we want to get right now? Are we looking for better ideas, validation of the solution, the use cases, and then the right activities with them, and with a focus on that this is a relational activity, right? It's not a transactional, we want something from you. It's relational, right? And they want wins as well from the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that those aspects that you have hit on. What are some of the things that you see companies, some of the mistakes they make starting a community that you can help us avoid and not have to learn from those mistakes ourselves?
Yeah. So in no particular order and with no particular priority, I'll just give you some thoughts and we can kind of chat through that. So I mentioned that there's sort of the internal, how do you build the product? The other piece is once the product is out there, what do you do to support it? And if we kind of switch gears to that more, once it's out there, how do you support it question? I think a lot of people, the very first thing that I'll give a flag for is thinking about the product, sorry, the community as that transactional function, right? If we have a community in place, we can get peer-to-peer support, and then we don't have to hire as many support professionals inside the company. If we have a community, then they'll do all the advocacy and the marketing for us, and we don't have to spend as much on marketing, right? Those are fundamentally flawed positions to take, not because they're not potentially true, right? There are plenty of times where, depending on the type of product or the type of audience, having a peer-to-peer support might be actually much more interesting and valuable to them than having phone service, right? Phone call. But if you start from that transactional mindset, then you're really approaching this as what can I get from you? And again, community is inherently relational, not transactional, and you can feel it. You can just feel it. If I get a phone call from somebody at a company and they're a friend of mine and they go straight to trying to sell me something, no, maybe I want that product. Maybe I want that service from you, but I immediately withdraw, right? And when you're trying to create community, that is a relationship over time. And starting with the idea of how are we trying to help them in order to help us, in order to help them. My mantra for 20 something years has been everybody goes home happy. I really want to make sure that the community understands that I know what they want and desire and get excited about. And I want to message that to them so they understand I know it, I believe it, I respect it. That allows me to say in turn, in order for me to do all those things, here's what I need back from you. The company needs to drive retention rates this year. We're having struggles with those. I'm going to be upfront and frank about that. And if you guys can help me do these things, excellent. But at the right time, right? I have to build that relationship with them first in a long-term, non-transactional kind of way so that I can be very clear, here's what we need from you. And they go, oh, no problem, happy to help because you've been giving us all this stuff, right? The best example I can give of that is at Lego. In the early days of that fan community, they were very skeptical. Here comes this guy from the company. I mean, I was part of the community and then I started working for Lego and I became immediately the guy from the company. But he just wants something from us. He just wants to sell us things, or he just wants us to work for free or promote for free or whatever. And so it was very clear that was the vibe. They were very open about that very quickly. And so I've immediately switched any sort of sales-oriented, company need-oriented approach to them and spent the beginning of that relationship saying, what do you need from the company? Tell me more. How can I help? Here's a win. I'm going to help you with that. I'm going to make that happen. You need those things? Here's those things. And then as they started sort of getting hooked on those things and saying, wow, this is really great. I like this. I'd say, yeah, if you want more of it, here's how to go about getting more of that, right? I still need to sell boxes. I still need to get promotion as much as possible. So every time you do a local event, here's some things you can do to help me out so I can go back and use that as a story to my executives that says, here's why to do this, right? It's this everybody goes home happy mantra. We start there. That's the mindset that we go into it with. The first task is to figure out what our purpose is, right? Not just a business goal, but what is the purpose? Why do we have a community instead of a really great knowledge base, right? Why do we have a community instead of in-app, if we're doing digital software development, an in-app help section, right? we're doing it because of something bigger than either one of us. Again, that tagline I mentioned at the front about Lego as a creative medium, I was really using that to say, you believe it, I believe it. That's why we do what we do in community. And when we can all sort of get together around this shared purpose, it's something to build the relationship on and the connection on, but it's also pulls it away from it feeling transactional, because now my responsibility as the company to drive this idea that Lego is a creative medium is to make sure we're making amazing products and selling them and getting out to as many people as possible. I'm still talking about sales, but I'm doing it from the position of of shared value to both of us, shared purpose for both of us, right? So that'd be those. I'll take a pause there. Those are the first two big ones I always talk about to start off any community discussion.
I was going to say that's a lot just to focus on there, which is excellent.
Right.
That there needs to be a shared purpose, not transactional. And you may have some other places you were going, but what I want to follow up on that was, you are building a relationship around some common denominators, the shared purpose for everyone involved. Any tips on who from the organization should be involved in the community? Because there's not all of us are wired to want to participate in that. And I would think you're looking for people that are probably more extroverted, that enjoy getting to know people in the community and building those relationships. What about that?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. I think there's, as with so many things, there's a couple of parts to that answer. But I will say, as a very long-term community guy, I don't know how I got into this career because I'm extremely introverted. I just play an extrovert on TV, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And what you'll find is a lot of community people that do this for a living are actually introverted, right? It's kind of a strange dynamic. But what I'll say is, you asked the question, who should come from the company should get involved? And it kind of depends on the dynamic of the program you're building. So if you're building a public-facing, large-scale community platform, then you want to have somebody that's responsible for that from a community team, community manager, community professional standpoint, right? Somebody who really understands community building in charge of that platform. If you're doing something like a CDPD program where you're trying to improve your product design, then you can bring in somebody like me to help a product person design and execute that program.
Right.
Whatever you're doing, having somebody who's ultimately responsible for it as a party host role is always important, right? It doesn't have to be anybody in particular, but there's some traits there, right? So if you're doing a large scale community platform, you want to have somebody who really understands those sort of social dynamics. If you're doing something for the product team, you can't necessarily just go find a random support agent or somebody from the marketing team or a person from the COO's office or something just because they've got free time. There has to be some passion for it, right? You can really tell when you put somebody in charge of these programs that doesn't really have passion for the project. It doesn't quite work as well. It's like any good party host, right? You want to you have to have a desire to be hosting the party to be a good party host, right? But I've seen this on the product side. I've seen this with somebody who is on the community team, sort of taking that role up, because the goal is to start a small CDPD program, but then kind of start to embed that mindset into the product team, into the community team, get those two different silos working together much more closely. As you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of great feedback that happens. There's a lot of great ideas that happen out in the community. How do you bring that in a way that makes sense? And so you can do it as a small program specifically, but you're also hoping that it's sort of contextualized in the larger company footprint so that your whole company is thinking about how do we get in front of customers? How do we bring that data back? And how do we internalize it effectively? But beyond the passion piece, I always say you have to have some sort of champion at the executive or senior manager level. And you need somebody that has the ability to spend some time on it, because relationships take time.
Right.
You can't just show up and say, I've spent $50. Let's get started, right? Like you need to actually get to know somebody, and that happens over time. Otherwise, it's just a survey or market research activity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. So many more things we could talk about for sure, but we got the framework in place, your 4 steps, which is really good. The tentacles, you talked about the things that we want out of that to make this make sense, and so many good things that are built in, right? Just having the advocacy when you launch the new product, having the validation that you know that you're creating the product that customers are wanting along the way, really powerful. And then some really good insights on mistakes that we should avoid, right? To make sure we understand the purpose. And I do like this notion of the party host, right? Your community person. Think of a good party host that's going to build those relationships and make it a win-win for everyone that is involved. So loved all that. We also like innovation quotes. Going to ask you for one in just a moment. But first, we do help product managers all the time. This is why we do the podcast, so that product managers can have some new information. I think this has been quite valuable. There's also the training that I provide product managers through my business, in addition to the university teaching I do. That is called Product Mastery Now, same as the podcast name. And we have three main programs there. The one I want to talk about is the Rapid Product Mastery Experience. And this is really for growing product professionals. The way I approach this is not for new product managers. This is for people that have a few years of experience and want to fill in the gaps and make sure they're solid. They're probably getting ready to move into leadership roles. And the Product Mastery Experience is built on 7 knowledge areas to help you get grounded in the things that you need to know to be successful. And it's great for individuals and frankly, even better for groups and organizations. If you are a product VP that has a group of product managers that you want to upscale, you want to take care of them some. No doubt, Jake, you have been in many organizations where product managers are saying, yeah, I'd like to have some training to make sure people are taking care of me too. This is a great way to do that. To find out more about that, simply go to productmasterynow.com and you'll see those training opportunities. Jake, back to a quote. What do you have for us and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so I'll give the one that stuck out to me for many years, and I have to warn you, it sort of sounds a little dicey up front, but you have to think it through. So I went to school for product design, and my internship during college was at a medical product designers company, and he had a framed Michael Jordan, Air Jordan T-shirt, Nike Air Jordan T-shirt up on his wall that said, "Somewhere someone is practicing, and when you meet them, they will beat you." And it took me a long time. It took me most of that summer to figure out what that really meant. And because it seems so harsh, but I've always thought about that as how much stuff is going on around us. And there's always somebody that might be doing something slightly better or slightly bigger or slightly with bigger budgets. The real question is, where are we competing? Which court are we competing on? Is it the small pickup court at the Y, or are we going to the NBA, right? And I've always wanted to be on the NBA wood, right?
Big court.
And and I think that really resonates with me in my product-oriented mindset too, that there's a lot of really great things we can do, but who are we competing with, and what's the differentiation between us and others? As a community guy, I think the community is a huge differentiator between many products out there.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most listened to podcasts that we've done in the last couple of years was with the product VP at Wise Consumer Electronics. And we spent much more time than I thought we were going to in that discussion about the value of the community. Because I want to know, how is it Wise creates products? And well, the answer, according to him, is because we have this really motivated community, and they help them in many ways, providing ideas and testing products and prototypes and giving feedback and doing co-development.
Yeah,
and
it's fantastic.
And it's so important. And you get to help companies figure out these programs. And we're really glad that you provide that service and you help us think about what's involved in getting started with that. How can people find out more about the work you're doing, more about resources you have available?
Yeah, and I'll sort of close out with a thought too, as I talk about what I do for a living. I'm continually blown away by how many times I hear from product people in particular that, no, we've got plenty of knowledge. We know what we're doing. We've been doing this a long time. We don't need any outside voices. It's just another inbox to check or another task to do, another voice in the room. We don't need any more of that. And the work that I do is consulting for companies of all sizes that is really about finding really valuable people to bring in and doing it in a way that adds value, that makes it fun, that makes it efficient, to get that sort of feedback. Because so many times when you break down, well, why do you not think that there's anything valuable outside this product development team? Is because they've had some really rocky times in the past doing that. And so that's been an inspiration for me over the years to try and figure out how to build programs in ways that make it easier for product teams to engage with customers and community members. And so if any of the listeners are interested in talking about this or exploring it for their company, you can find me really easily at jakemckee.com.
Okay, that's easy. We'll make sure the link is in the show notes as well, but jakemckee.com.
Excellent.
So, Jake, thank you so much for joining us and helping us understand how communities can help with product growth, can help us create new products, can help us do a better job launching products, can help us sustain products in the marketplace. A lot of value there from communities. I appreciate all the insights.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
And listeners, if you want to find the written version of everything we discussed, simply go to productmasterynow.com/537. As always, everyone, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.